Welcome, Nomi Khedawala. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
We're super excited to have you. Are you ready to pour into our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, Nomi, would you share your leadership journey and what you're currently doing?
Sure. So currently, I am a senior technical program manager at Reddit, where I am leading program management for the team that does everything related to Reddit Answers, which is our LLM that we're currently working on, and all things related to search. And over the course of my career, I've worked at companies like Twitter, Snowflake, Strava, Tinder, and now I'm at Reddit, worked at program management, all those companies across various functions like legal, product operations, etc. So Tinder was a great experience. Reddit's also been an equally great experience, and yeah, we're just having fun.
So, really important work managing all those questions. I love questions. This is why I started my podcast because I wanted to get better at asking them. I still have room to grow. So, tell us, where can we find your services?
Best way to reach me is LinkedIn. I'm talking to a lot of startup founders as well and a lot of investors. So always looking to give back what I've learned over the course of my career and hopefully will help someone else and pay back the privilege that I've had working at a lot of these companies.
Now, a lot of leaders are tuning in. They are either brand new leaders or seasoned leaders. So, what can they get from your services?
Typically work with product leaders. And so my passion actually is product operations. And so I really love to take a look at how is an idea going from someone's head into the hands of users and what does that process look like? It's different for every organization, it's different for every team, but it's an important process. And there can be a lot of hiccups along the way. There can be a lot of friction along the way, especially as an organization is looking to scale, looking to grow. So typically I work with product leaders and program management leaders to try to shape what does that process look like today? How can we be better? How can it be more efficient? And with program management teams, really looking at how do we scale a program management team. I've been fortunate to kind of be on teams that are very nascent, very early on in their formation. I think Reddit is the first time in my career where I'm coming into an already established program management team. So I spent a lot of my career taking a look at how does program management and program managers in an organization really communicate their value? Where do we plug into that process of taking an idea from someone's head into the hands of users? And how do we work closely with execs? How do we work closely with ICs? How do we work closely with middle management? And that's true for both the product operation side and the program management side.
Important work because it's not just about the process of production, it's
Right.
also leading the people who are
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
working with the process in production.
Right.
As I was looking through your LinkedIn, I read through your little text. It says teams that align ship on time.
Yeah.
I know there's wisdom there. When did you learn that? And what does it mean?
I think the most obvious point in my career where that was true, I think at Tinder. When I was there, we're shipping a lot of great things, but how do we make sure that they are having the desired effect? And when we were taking a look at what we call the product development life cycle, which is kind of that process of how do we go from idea to actual feature or something that the users can interact with, we noticed that there's a lot of inconsistency in where teams were plugging in when they were plugging into this process and that gave us just this obvious motto of we need to get everyone aligned. And so that's kind of where that comes from of teams that align ship on time.
So that's a big task to get
Mhm.
everything aligned. What would be some of the clues that we can tap into where this isn't aligning quite right? And then what could we do about it?
I think one common trait that I've seen in a lot of the organizations that I've been in is that product and engineering typically tend to move a million miles an hour, and that's to be expected, trying to create the value as quickly as possible. But oftentimes there's implications when it comes to your go-to-market strategy. There's implications when it comes to legal compliance or policy compliance and things like that. And so typically one telltale sign that I've noticed is you'll have these like non-technical teams coming and saying things like, hey, like I didn't know that this was happening. Like I didn't know that we were releasing this feature and there's all these things that are not quite right about it or like, are creating some risk for us. Another telltale sign is you typically tend to have a lot of roadmap, I would say, turbulence in a sense that you oftentimes get disrupted in what you have planned versus like what you were actually shipping. And that can be a variety of reasons. It can be shifting market conditions, it can be shifting corporate strategy, product strategy, etc. But again, that kind of signals that misalignment between top down communication and bottom up communication. And so when I say like teams that align. It's not necessarily just like teams of product, just teams of engineering. I'm also kind of looping in the execs into that as well and senior leadership teams because it's really important to me that the executive strategy and what the executives are thinking is equally important to communicate, but it's also extremely important to make sure that everyone understands what it is they're looking to accomplish. It's also really important that everyone's speaking the same language, right? And so communication is a big part of it, but also just taking a look at where's everyone plugging in, when are they plugging in, how much are we collaborating with them, and are we actually shipping what we want to ship or what we set out to ship at the beginning of a quarter, beginning of a half, or beginning of the year.
Those are really important questions. And for you to come up with those questions, it requires deep observation and listening.
Absolutely.
We can manage processes, but we've got to lead people.
Yeah, that's always the challenging part. I don't know how familiar you are with the program management space, but you'll hear it a lot in organizations that have program management teams that we are expected to influence without authority. And that's really challenging to do, especially, when people have their own priorities. It does require a lot of observation, but a lot of relationship building as well, and a lot of earning that trust to be able to have that influence over folks to say, like, hey, look, like, I know what you're working on is important, but this is also pretty important. So, like, how do we tackle both of these things at the same time, or where's the trade-off? To even be able to open up that conversation, I think takes some skilled relationship building and trust building as well.
So you said something influencing without authority, which a lot of people experience. I also think about the law of the lid, which John Maxwell talks about. You can't supersede the top leader, but you
Right.
can circumnavigate some things. And one of the things that I know I speak to leaders about, or people who are looking to influence without the position, is to develop themselves, a
Mhm.
self-awareness. It's an emotional intelligence. It's looking into leading themselves well so that they can move towards the next step, which is super important, which is what you do.
Yeah, a lot of what I do and a lot of what I would say program managers do as a whole is we do have to look for how do we find different channels to get our point across, to get some movement, right? And so one of the tactics that I found to be pretty successful is bottom up approach, where if you're not really getting much traction with the leader that you're working with or with the top leader, as you put it, it's really important to be able to show the value of what you are doing by getting that buy-in from the people who roll up into them. If you're creating that value and you're able to execute and you're able to show that these things are valuable or this initiative that I'm working on is valuable and here's a value that I've been able to create, here's a buy-in that I've been able to get. Depends on the leader, but oftentimes like I've found that to be a successful strategy as well. I think it's oftentimes hesitation comes in when it's like, well, is this really needed? Do I really need my people to spend the time on this right now? Or I don't agree that this is a best practice of how we should be doing things. So yeah, oftentimes like it's just about doing it anyways. And I think it goes back to the motto of ask for forgiveness, not ask for permission. So oftentimes you're just asking for forgiveness and saying like, hey, like, yeah, I did this anyways. And here's how it's working out.
And I can't help but think how much energy it requires to think through all those processes, because it's not just about delivering a product, it's about leading people who come in all different shapes and sizes and different backgrounds. So I'm curious because I know that that requires a lot of energy. How
Mhm.
do you prepare daily? Like, I have a reset in the morning. I have to ground, I have to align, I have to do my yoga, my meditation so that I can deliver. What do you do to prepare?
Early on in my career, I experienced quite a bit of burnout to the point where I actually ended up in the ER 2 days before Thanksgiving a few years ago. And when I came back to work and shared with my coworkers, this is what happened, they were telling me like, there's somebody else who like ended up in the hospital. And that's kind of when it really hit me to say that, I really need to take care of myself. And so ever since then, one of the non-negotiables for me is creating boundaries. And so 5, 6 p.m. on an average work week or average cadence can get in touch with me if there's an emergency, but I won't be replying to emails or to Slack messages. And I'll try to just turn off, go do what kind of gives me the ability to find the peace. It all stems from just having that boundary. And each day's preparation is really sitting down in the mornings and taking stock of, okay, what did I do yesterday? Like, what do I need to do today? And is there any fire that's burning, even if it's not my responsibility or is not something that I can contribute to? I try to be aware of it just to be prepared in the event I need to jump in, or in the event that I get asked about it, or I need to communicate any turbulence that has emerged as a result of, this firefighting that somebody else or some other team might be doing at the time.
Well, a lot of leaders go through that burnout, and
Hmm.
it's not necessary. I just did a training this morning where it's smart to learn from experience, but it's wise to learn from other people's experience. So, those of you tuning in,
Yeah,
lean in here because we can experience burnout if we're not considering self care. And so, thank you for your wisdom.
of
Now,
course.
as leaders, we often face significant changes, we face crisis. When you look back at your life, at your career, what has been the best crisis and why?
I guess it depends on who you ask. But I think the best crisis was the one that we were facing at Tinder, where we really needed to take a hard look. How are we actually doing this process of shipping our products? And I say that it was a crisis because there was a really big importance on ensuring that, we maintain our revenue metrics, our product metrics, and we really needed to move quickly. I think that was the best experience in my career so far because the culture of the company, but also the people that I was working with, everyone kind of knew that, okay, we need to figure this out. And we knew that like none of us had a silver bullet, but we were all committed to seeing it through, and we were all committed to figuring out what is the right solution, which I don't find in a lot of bigger organizations where there's a higher expectation of you having the experience, you being seasoned, and being able to jump in and solve crises immediately, right? Because you should be been there, done that, seen that. But that's not necessarily always true, and every organization is different. And so it was truly just the patience, even the execs had with saying, okay, we want to do this right. We want to do this in a way where we're not coming back and rebuilding this from square one. Of course, like we can iterate on it, but we need to make sure that we're as close to doing the right thing the first time around. And that's also because, we don't want to create this change management fatigue as well within the organization where we say, hey, like, here's this new process everyone has to follow. And then 6 months later, it's like, hey, we've changed like this whole stage of the process. So now, like, learn all these new things. I think very quickly you'll get people checking out because it does take time for an organization to get into that rhythm of being able to follow that process effectively, consistently, and successfully. And that can take 6 months to a year. It was definitely one of the best things that I've had the privilege of being able to work on. And I do believe that all of us who worked on it left a lasting impact in the organization and with the people that we were working with. And some of those folks I still talk to. And if they ever need anything, always there and always happy to help them.
I mean, it's clear how you value people, Nomi, and that is the key, right?
Yeah.
Your subtitle of Teams That Align, Ship on Time. So, what if we have a problem that's never come up? Let's say you have a brand new team,
Hmm.
they're getting to know each other. What is one of the first things that they could do? There's a problem they've never
Yeah.
had before, and this is a brand new team or a team that
Yeah.
really isn't connected yet. So, you come into the picture. How will we start the process?
I think first is taking a look at the problem and saying, okay, like, what is the priority of this? Do we need to solve this yesterday, or is the solution going to take time for us to figure out what it is, to build, etc.? There's a difference in how I would approach it based on the urgency. If it's highly urgent, then I would say, okay, like, let's just jump into problem solving. Like, what is it that we are looking to solve? And one thing that I've learned over the course of my career that I think is very important is root cause analysis. And so really getting down to what is the foundational thing that we are trying to solve. An example of that is what I've seen in a lot of organizations, especially when it comes to processes that are connecting top down, bottom up. There's always a layer of trust that is either fractured or broken or is just completely missing, right? And so when you get into process design, it's very easy to fall into the trap of designing for trust versus designing for utility. And so when you build for trust, not to say there isn't the right place and time for that, but when you start off building with trust, I think you kind of miss building for the root cause, right? Like the trust will be rebuilt as long as the process works, as long as the outcomes are the intended outcomes. So if it's highly urgent, let's take a look at the problem. Let's break it down. What is the root cause? And how do we work together to build that, right? And I think the sense of urgency is a distraction in a good way, where we don't get caught up on team dynamics. We're really just focused on problem solving, on delegating, this person's going to do this person's going to do that, I will do this. I think if you have a longer runway to solve the problem, I would kind of take a step back and say, like, let's look at our team dynamic and let's really build camaraderie. One of the reasons that my team worked so well at Tinder was because we had so much camaraderie amongst us. We really cared about each other. We were able to joke with each other. We were really able to respectfully disagree, which I think is also highly valuable and important in any team, is being able to disagree and commit to whatever the direction the decision maker has laid out for us. So with a longer runway, I think you can kind of get a little bit creative and say, let's really get to know one another. Let's get to know what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. How do we think? How do we break down a problem? Who's good at analysis? Who's good at building? And really play to our strengths. When something is highly urgent, I don't think you have the luxury of being able to figure out those things and play to your strengths. I think you're just trying to solve a problem. But if you have a longer runway, I think you can really, really be strategic and come up with a solution that I think is more impressive, more put together, and probably will deliver higher value than something that's extremely urgent.
Yeah, and the foundation of all of that, you mentioned it, is trust. Trust is
Right,
not an easy thing to build, and it's not built quickly. So
right,
it requires some front end thinking, right? If you have a
right,
team, before the problem shows up, let's
right.
build the team, let's align the team, because whatever problem comes down the funnel, we will be able to solve it because there's the foundation of trust. Really important. And in leadership, we need to take responsibility for how we trust as well. If we don't trust, if we've had, let's say, trauma in our past and things trigger us, it's very difficult to build trust in your team if you're not a trusting leader. This is where self-development, leadership development, and self-awareness comes in effective leadership. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. Now, Nomi, is someone committed to continuous learning? What are you learning right now?
As is everyone else, trying to stay up to date on all things AI and LMs. The space is moving so fast. Every week, I feel like there's something new to learn, to think about, to consider. But I think going a little bit deeper into that, what I'm really thinking about right now, less so from a career perspective, and I think more broadly, I spent a lot of my career on the consumer side, working at social media companies. Curious about two things at the moment. One is, will there be a resurgence of the consumer space within the US? I think from an investor standpoint, a lot of investors that I talk to, when I mention to them that I'm interested in investing in the consumer space, they're kind of shocked and they're kind of like, why are you doing that in the US? Because, we've moved, at least from what I can see and from what I'm exposed to, there's so much of an emphasis on investing in the B2B side. But with the advent of AI and LLMs, et cetera, which there's always been an element in a lot of the products and things that we enjoy as consumers. But I'm curious if the broader consumer base is going to desire a more authentic, low tech experience than what we have today. I think just the sentiment that I see online, even on Reddit, is a lot of companies are trying to extract as much value out of their users. They're trying to really optimize for how do we upsell a user? How do we make sure that they're on subscriptions, et cetera? And I'm sure, you're probably experiencing this as well. There's more subscriptions now than you can keep track of. So I'm really curious, like, how this is going to play out in the long run. Are consumers going to desire a shift back towards more simplistic UI, more simplistic products and features? Is it really too much where everything is a subscription, where everything is upselling, where everything is about extracting LTV? That's one thing. I think second thing is, how does AI impact our society and evolution of society, especially with things like AI generated video, deep fakes, these things that are becoming a lot harder to really differentiate what is AI and what isn't. And as AI continues to get better, that distinction is only going to get more challenging. So I'm really curious how that plays out. And, are governments or are companies going to have policies that really confront potentially malicious intent, which you see playing out in a lot of places in the world at the moment?
Nomi, good leaders ask good questions, and you have tons of great questions. All right. So when
Yeah.
you reflect on leadership today, what are your concerns and what gives you the most hope?
I think the biggest concern for me is a lot of the leaders that I see and a lot of the leaders that I work with are focused on problem solving and moving a million miles an hour. And that has its place, but what I'd like to see is a lot more vulnerability and a lot more empathetic leadership. I think once you earn the trust of the people that roll up into you, you'll be able to solve those problems. You'll be able to move a million miles an hour. But unless you really have that trust, unless you've built that trust, it's very difficult to rally them to move at that pace. And to also be sure that, you're getting the right information from them at the right time to be able to do your job effectively, to make decisions effectively. What I've seen time and time again is even well-intentioned leaders who are looking to move at a really fast pace inadvertently create this fear within their team of, oh, like I can't tell them that something is off the rails or like something is getting off track. So I think creating that vulnerability of saying like I don't really know if this is the right thing, but this is what we're doing. That responsibility is on me. This is my call, and just kind of reiterating that they don't have anything to worry about. And I think as leaders progress through their careers, it's easy to forget your experience as an IC, especially with how quickly you're having to move and the decisions that you're having to make as they get more and more consequential. I think you get further and further removed from your experience as an IC. And so for me, like I try to remember and keep in mind what my experiences were like as an IC and the leaders that I saw around me and what lessons I've learned from them, both good and bad. And so I think that gives me hope because I have talked to and seen a few leaders who do understand the value of trust. So I know that they're out there, but oftentimes they're more soft spoken or quieter or behind the scenes. And I would love to see them be more vocal and have them hear a lot more advocacy about the empathetic style of leadership. So I think it gives me hope knowing that they're out there, knowing that I've come across them, knowing that I am one as well. Empathy and trust are kind of really two big values that I carry in my life.
And those aren't easy things to develop, but they're
Right.
important things to develop. It's interesting. They used to call them soft skills, which I hated because they were
Yeah.
the hardest skills to develop, but necessary, especially for leadership, vulnerability, trust, that empathy. One of
Hmm.
the things that I see about you is that you have this insatiable curiosity, which is why you
Hmm.
ask questions. Asking questions and keeping a pulse on what's going on in your team. Like you can make decisions, but you also have to ask questions of your team and observe and get some feedback
Right.
because it could be headed in the wrong direction and you'll never know because you didn't ask the questions. So I love what you do there. All right. So, Nomi, we have a surprise question from a previous guest. You ready to tackle it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Christine LePerriere wants to know.
What habits are you trying to unlearn?
That's a good question, actually. I think for me, it's overthinking. One of the points of feedback that I've gotten in my career is don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Oh,
One of the things that I tend to fall into is trying to get it perfect on the first try. And I think that perfectionism or that desire to be perfect has led me into a lot of habitual overthinking. And so trying to really take a step back, slow down the mind, slow down time, and just, really take an objective, clean look and have that reassurance of it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be high quality, but high quality doesn't necessarily mean perfect. Unlearning that has been something that the people that I work with have also benefited from because I think it sets an example of like, look, like we know we won't attain perfection, but that doesn't mean that we can't improve our standard. That doesn't mean that we can't improve our quality. I think it's better to chase and reframe it as chasing high quality versus chasing perfectionism.
I think a lot of leaders struggle with wanting to be perfect because it's
Yeah.
a reflection on their leadership, but
Yeah.
it can be a stumbling block to many of us if we don't really tune into that. So thank you so much. Now, as a
Yeah, of
listener
course.
to this podcast, Nomi, what's a question that you'd like a future leadership guest to respond to?
Yeah. I'd love to know what are some of the most challenging times that they had as ICs and how has that shaped their approach to leadership?
All right, Nomi, a great question. Thank you so much. Now, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I'll just say that, a lot of times like leaders tend to kind of exude this like high caliber, like high power, like million miles an hour thinking. And I think that translates into like how they can connect, right? They're also trying to connect a million miles an hour and that doesn't land. And so just in general, like what I encourage people to do when they are talking to leaders is like challenge them on where's the emotional side of your leadership, right? You're in the position that you're in because you've proven your competency over the course of your career. But competency doesn't translate to being a great leader. I think leadership is a lot more about the trust, the empathy, the vulnerability, the authenticity. I think competency is something you have, which is why you are where you are, right? If you didn't have the competency, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. As like the world continues to evolve, as society continues to evolve, of younger and younger leaders coming into leadership, I think it's important that leadership is not just about competency. It's equally about like how well do you build a team and how well do you inspire them to follow your lead? Can you take them into battle? Will they follow you into battle? If you haven't accomplished that, then like you're not necessarily a leader. You're just a decision maker. You are an expert, which is I think very different from a leader. If there's anything of value that you took away from anything that I've said, please feel free to reach out. Always happy to have conversations with folks and learn about what they're doing and learn if there's anything that I can do to help.
So once again, how do they connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn just by searching my name, Nomi Khedawala. I'll probably be the only Nomi Khedawala that will come up. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there, or you can email me at nomi@nyk.ventures. That's my angel investing email, so feel free to reach out to me there.
Nomi, thank you so much for adding value to me and to our listeners. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Lily, for having me. It was a pleasure.